Greetings, Delta Chi members around the world. Thank you for tuning in for the 2020 International Chapter Meeting. My name is Peter Lane from the Georgia Southern Chapter, graduate 2007. I'm the Director of Development for the Delta Chi Educational Foundation and your moderator for tonight's meeting. I'm coming to you live from my home office here in Atlanta, Georgia. Tonight's panelists are the 53rd AA International President, Aaron Otto, of the Kansas State Chapter, graduate 1998. The Delta Chi Educational Foundation Chairman of the Board, Rod Arnold, Texas A&M, 1988. And the Delta Chi Executive Director, Jared Bright, of the Central Missouri Chapter, graduate 2004. Tonight's live stream international chapter meeting is the next evolution of the phone call and is truly an international meeting. Delta Chi members living abroad in over 25 countries have tuned in today. Based on feedback, this format is designed to help engage members in a meaningful way. We'll have 30 to 40 minutes, and a replay of tonight's meeting will be available in the near future on multiple platforms. We're excited to address your questions on topics that impact all of us. Please frame your questions around policy and big picture initiatives. If we don't get to your questions on air, all questions will receive a follow-up response from the headquarters or foundation staff. How to engage? You can ask questions on Facebook or deltachi.org, and please include your chapter and graduation year. While you're listening, if you feel inspired to make a gift to support the Delta Chi Fraternity and the Delta Chi Educational Foundation, please do so by visiting deltachi.org/give. Now, let's get to our questions. Our first question is the topic that all three of you will have a chance to respond to. Question number 1. Two alumni, Ed Fusco of the Embry-Riddle Chapter, graduate 1971, an OWC honoree and new founder, and Mark Horner of the Kennesaw State Chapter 2010, the ABT president at Embry-Riddle, both Trustee Society donors, want to know, is there support to develop a D's Academy where chapter treasurers can receive centralized training on a recommended software platform, such as Omega Financial? They suggest this is an opportunity to teach business skills like managing billing cycles, invoicing, collections, payables, etc. Jared, we're going to give you the question first. Could you discuss the training that's been developed in the past year, the briefs, the webinars, specifically the RLC officer tracks, and address this immediate need?
Sure, absolutely. Great question. We paid attention to surveys and assessments sent out to undergraduate brothers and alumni, and we've heard the desire for more D resources. We've also heard the desire for more C resources. As you know, a lot of the C responsibilities directly affect the D responsibilities and their ability to do their job. This year we added the C and D track to the RLC. That curriculum is in place and debuts at the first RLC this coming weekend. And we really feel like it is providing the desired tools based on the feedback. We've also had success with onboarding sessions for officers in 2019, specifically the D and the C, which were new this year. And they can participate in the onboarding process during their officer transition. You know, in 2019, we hired an expert in finance as the director of finance to assist chapter Ds and work directly with chapters. Just recently, resources were distributed to all chapter A's and D's with tools, resources, and best practices to set them up for success, like a budget template and resources on taxes and 990s. Most importantly, they gained a direct line of communication with James Ratliff, our new director of finance. I'll say this, adding another academy, I wish we could add an academy for every single officer. That would be amazing, especially one where they're traveled to. But keeping in mind that A's Academy itself costs upwards of $100,000, you know, we would need a really strong foundation to be able to hold another program. I think it's a great idea, but I think we can really leverage technology and work directly with chapter advisors like Ed and others who can provide local assistance to our chapter Ds, and we would love to hear feedback on that as well. At the end of the day, we just want them to be more successful, and based on their feedback, it's starting to work, and so we appreciate everybody's hard work.
Excellent. Thank you. Aaron, could you share from your perspective as the AA where you see a new leadership program fitting into the long-term strategic initiatives?
Sure. I want to thank Ed and Mark for that question. If you dial back, I first elected to the Board of Regents in 2003. And it was a few years later that the Board of Regents saw the need for the A's Academy in 2006 and kind of gave that as a task and assignment to the staff, and they ran with it. And we've had 16 successful A's Academies ever since. I would say a continuation of that is when we were looking at SI 1.0, there was an identified need through our leadership group at putting together something for our incoming sophomores or incoming juniors, our future executive committee members, basically, to be part of a leadership training program. And that's where the Emerging Leaders Academy was done. And that will be held for the third time this year in a special situation where we'll be putting that on before convention at our new Colonies host school at Washington University in St. Louis right before a convention. So somebody has a chance to go for a few days of training there and then immediately roll over into convention. So the idea about having additional leadership training opportunities like Jared outlined are completely consistent with where the direction has been from the board when it comes to past and I'm sure future strategic initiatives.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Rod, will you please address this from a foundation perspective of how a program like this or any leadership program could be funded and what giving vehicles exist where donors can make a gift, such as through the Ray Galbraith Leadership Fund?
Well, that's one of the areas that we've been focusing on in regards to expanding the bucket, so to speak, in the foundation. It's all about the donors, and the donors direct where they want those dollars to go. So people that are interested in funding leadership training, which I think is the apex of what we all want to do for undergraduate brothers, there's a great way to get involved. One of the biggest initiatives we have at the foundation right now is, as you guys are well aware, is expanding the donor base as rapidly as we can. We've been very dependent on some gracious brothers funding a large percent of leadership training for a very long time, and our goal number one is to expand that donor base. So my message would be to everyone watching: there is a place for everyone in the donor ranks, especially in our new what we have listed the campaign as the Army of Donors. There's multiple levels where we could use your help in that regard, because this leadership training is important. It's extremely important. But what we have got to grow towards is do what other organizations such as ours and similar foundations and other industries do, which is fund this stuff in perpetuity. The goal would be to where we have the dollars in place permanently to permanently fund our leadership training. So the Ray Galbraith Leadership Fund is the catch-all account, so to speak, and there's a couple of different ways to give within that, but you can certainly reach out to one of our two development officers and talk about how you can donate towards that leadership fund. But I think it's a great idea.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's a great way how all three of you are working together to help define new solutions for our organization. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 2. Aaron, this is for you. In your address this morning, you talked about the success that Barrister Capital Corporation is having in acquiring housing and managing properties on behalf of Delta Chi. Furthermore, that $500,000 has been invested from the Delta Chi Fraternity's Board of Regents. Eric Stice of the Southern Illinois chapter, graduate 2004, is a Trustee Society donor and asks if you could please describe in more detail how Barrister is helping change the landscape of Delta Chi's housing facilities, the benefits of this initiative, and how members can learn more.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thanks for the question, Eric. I would say this just to repeat what I mentioned in my previous comments. Barrister Capital Corporation came out of one of the strategic initiatives. I remember the date very well. It was the pre-convention board meeting in Pittsburgh in 2012. And we had been doing research. At the time, Regent Jeff Broderick and a group had been doing research on the possibility of expanding housing options beyond the traditional loan model and providing funds in that way, which Delta Chi had done for decades, and found a lot of other fraternities were going along and doing property management, advising, in some cases, house ownership. And so the Board of Regents decided to kind of launch Barrister Capital Corporation, or start a separate housing corporation as such on a national, international level. And that group has been very successful ever since. They offer services. They have a great website, Barrister Capital Corporation, barristercapital.org, where you can find on the Delta Chi website on the top right, if that's easy to remember. But they provide property management services. If you have questions about a house that you may already own and are looking for best practices, they've got common vendor sources from a standpoint of pre-existing contracts for volume discounts for different services. But then, yes, there are cases where they've gone and done incredible due diligence, and sometimes it's worked out that we've made an investment in a number of campuses, Oshkosh, Southern Illinois, even Northern Illinois, number of different schools, where they've made an investment. Sometimes it doesn't work financially and have to keep looking for new opportunity. But that group has been incredibly active, and I know stands ready with a growing staff and very active board to being helpful and trying to give us a competitive edge on some campuses where housing is terribly important.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Question number 3. Rod, this one's for you. Jeff Broderick of the Illinois State Chapter, graduate 1981, president of the Barrister Capital Corporation and a Trustee Society donor, states, "A properly funded endowment is an essential aspect of any long-term educational foundation." He wants to know if the Delta Chi Educational Foundation has any long-term plans and or where we are with our ability to fund a successful endowment.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for that question. I think the number one thing to remember about an endowment is, as a couple of us have commented over the last couple of months, the best time to start an endowment was 20 years ago. And I can give credit where credit's due. Aaron said that in one of our conversations on that. The challenge that we have is all foundations start off as a pass-through entity, right? So ours, like many others, was started a long time ago so that donors could give tax-deductible gifts to the fraternity, and that's how we exist. You reach a point where you have overheads where it doesn't matter the size of your foundation. You have overheads that are required by law. And what happens is all of a sudden your dollars, my dollars, everyone who gives annually to the fund, certain things have to be covered that are just plain overheads. And it's not fun. It's not exciting. You don't get to put your name over a door for anything for it. So the endowment is the long-term plan. The board, after multiple conventions, it took a long time to even bring it to the forefront where we got the language passed to open the endowment fund. We have not been actively marketing it, honestly, and the reason for that is we have immediate needs. The fraternity has immediate needs now that we're working to fulfill. So the long-term need, now that we have the mechanism in place, is now we're prepared to accept what are known as transformational gifts. So when someone leaves a large amount in an estate, we're able to put that in, so it's dollars that generate dollars in perpetuity. A lot of donors like to see their money work now, and we are here at the behest of the donors. If a donor wants to give to a particular program, that's what we do for that. So long term is certainly to start building dollars into that endowment, and we're looking for donors to help with that. I will say it has grown over the last couple of years quicker than we've expected it to.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We just got in our first question live in real time, so we want to ask that here. Nathan Press from the WIU 1999 graduate chapter, and I'm going to ask this. I think this is probably best for Aaron, maybe Jared. I'll let the two of you talk about it. How are you partnering with other fraternities and universities to help reduce negative stigmas and, in turn, increasing membership in Delta Chi?
Jared, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. Delta Chi is a member of the NIC and also sits on the governing council of the NIC. One of the ways that we collectively work is through the NIC as a trade organization to address press and media that may be of the negative nature, to turn around and make it a positive. And one of those is coming up this Sunday on CBS Sunday Morning News. Will be a piece with the Piazzas and Judd Horace, the president of the NIC, and just a way for all fraternities that are members of the NIC to speak collectively with one voice through the NIC to the public to tell them about what we're doing to address hazing prevention and reduce dangerous behaviors. So I think that's a big piece. I'll also say that we have increased our social media outreach as an organization, constantly trying to draw attention to Delta Chi's positives, to especially our alumni and the achievements of our undergraduates. And so we'll continue to reach more and more individuals, but not just members and alumni, parents, friends, campus professionals, all the people who we want to hear the story of Delta Chi, and we want to hear the values of Delta Chi. That's one of the ways that we reach them, and we really continue to strive to increase that outreach for positive results.
I would just add real quick, if I could, Peter. Two other things come to mind. One is, in order to promote positive stories, you have to know them. And so one of the things that's changed a lot in the last few years is been collecting a lot more data about what our chapters are doing. We couldn't tell you in the past exactly, and we still probably can't be precise, but we have a lot better idea, the kind of monies that even beyond the V Foundation, the different chapters and colonies are raising for local philanthropies. We see that number well over $250,000 every 2 years. That's phenomenal, on top of what they're doing for the V's Foundation. I would say also, Jared made a great point. When we had an NIC meeting a couple of years ago and I saw the Piazzas were going to be at lunch, I figured that was a conversation about why the Piazzas hate fraternities. No, they showed up in person and they talked about the fact they hate hazing. They hate the activity. They don't hate the organization. It can be band, it can be high schools, it can be fraternities, it can be college. It doesn't matter. And so we're working very hard to invite either the Piazzas or another family that's lost a son to hazing to our convention, and to share that message wherever they've gone. And it's amazing, their lives were changed, obviously losing a child. They've gone around to different fraternity conventions and other university settings, and the response has been unbelievable. And when we look for partnerships like that, where when that came out in September, I think of last year, CBS News couldn't believe, wait, you're sitting together and not at open war between the NIC CEO and the Piazzas. That to me is pretty remarkable. I think the last thing I'd add is that we try to look for ways to be cooperating with our campuses. We can go to open war, but you can win battles but lose wars, because we still are largely hosted by the campuses we're at. And so there's a few occasions where our campus is not following its own due process that we get pretty engaged, I'll use those terms, and try to remind them about their process they should be following. But by and large, the more we can do to be part of Greek advisors and be on the same team, the better off our groups end up being, and the less likely we are to have that kind of, our first response and thought is it must be bad. If they don't know us and we're not partnering with them, that's probably more likely to be their response.
Great. Thank you very much. Nathan, that was a great question. Jared, is there something else?
Yeah, just a shout out. A lot of credit to our brothers in our chapters for promoting what they're doing. Keep doing it. It's amazing work, and we want to share that with the world.
Jared, I got another question here for you. This is from John Melvin of the Ohio State Chapter, a graduate in 1955. He's Delta Chi. He was the Delta Chi of the Year in 1999. He's a Trustee Society donor, and he wants to know, are there early indicators of chapter behavior that the headquarters and alumni volunteers can monitor before a chapter or any of its members implement such egregious acts that it leads to the banning of the chapter, or worse, all fraternities at an academic institution?
Wow. Sincerely, what a great question. Thank you for asking that, because it's often a tough topic. So I appreciate that. There are a few things I draw attention to. I think first, any signs of extreme levels of solidarity. First, meaning a brother that cares more about simply existing, rather than doing the right thing, is and can be an indicator. It does start with lower level behavior and a lack of courage about holding our brothers accountable. So what I'd encourage, if there's no judicial board, that's a tall tale sign. If there's a judicial board in the chapter and they only assess fines for money, that's a tall tale sign, because it's not going to change the behavior alone. I'd say, ask for help. We have resources, webinars, experience, and frankly, we just want to help make it safer. I'd also say, look out for members exploiting group benefits. So what I mean is, if you see a focus on earning the right rather than introducing associate members to the brotherhood through learning or leadership development, and a shift from where the value becomes what that person can do for us rather than what can we offer each other as a brother in Delta Chi. So I think when you see that mentality start to change, you may want to start addressing it or have an open discussion about it. I'd also say if you see things like different levels of membership, newly initiated brothers or mids, as you've seen at some throughout our history, I'd say that's important to watch out for because it can also be a sign that hazing or acts of hazing exist at lower levels. I'd also just say that watch out for brotherhood events that are centered around alcohol or drinking games. Brotherhood events. High-risk consumption of alcohol, regardless of the setting, only leads to dangerous behavior. So prevention planning combined with expectation setting and holding each other accountable is key. I'd say all of this combined with open, honest conversations about the true meaning of brotherhood and what to do when something goes wrong is how we begin to change the culture. Open, honest discussions to talk about what to do when something goes wrong. That's how we start to change the culture.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Rod, we're going to move on to you. This question comes from George Prussell of the Huntsville chapter, graduate 2009. He's the current BB, and he's a Trustee Society donor. And he wants to know, how is the Delta Chi Educational Foundation looking going into 2020? Are we on track for the donation goals to meet grant requests and keep operating in the black?
We just returned from our winter board meetings in Florida, and as I had stated in our intro videos, I've never felt better about the direction of the foundation for a couple of reasons. Number one, the brothers that we have around the table, we have recruited skill sets and talent first, in addition to time and treasure, but talent first. And we have a very diversified board. We have a phenomenal committee system that's running. The people that are managing the development staff, the gentlemen, Peter here and Jason Sisk, the fundraising committee are all professionals, in that area of work. And we have a committee system made up of professionals in a number of the different areas. So we are operating in the black. Are we reaching all of the funding goals? Absolutely not. I can tell you right now, I would love to see us increase our goals, but we're trying to keep our growth goals very realistic so that when we are reporting on how things are going, I'd rather exceed the numbers than fall way short of them, because if other people are asking and trying to build other budgets based on what we're able to do via our donors, those numbers have to be real. So we entered this year with a very modest growth rate based on what happened last year from donors. And again, thank you very much. We had the second highest number of unique donors in 2019 than we've ever had. And the only other year that topped it was 2015. And that happened to be a year that we were really pushing to expand the 1890 Society amongst the undergraduate brothers. So we had a litany of undergraduate brothers sign up at RLCs to join. But other than that one year with that size donations, we have had a large number of unique donors this year that has made it extremely helpful. But it is building those ranks of the different levels of donors that are going to allow us to hit our goals, both on the operational side and the funding side.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The next question is going to be for Aaron, and we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the headquarters, the physical new property. David Cloutier, Embry-Riddle, 1992, a new founder, and Mike Moriarty of the Oshkosh chapter, 1971, a former DD, both Trustee Society donors, have asked about how the new headquarters was financed and if it is owned or rented. Could you talk about Martlet Incorporated, the governing structure, and why this new entity was created to own the new building?
Sure. That's a lot of good questions packed into one. I guess this process started probably 3 years ago. For many years, even dating back to the early 90s, there were questions about is the residential house we have in Iowa City suitable for the future needs of the Delta Chi Fraternity's international headquarters? And a decision was made then to expand the headquarters versus move. And my understanding, and we did confirm with the city of Iowa City, that that was the last expansion that could happen there. And so the time had come where we started a volunteer committee to start looking and assessing different communities we might want to locate a headquarters. And Iowa City was absolutely in the running, possibly in a different structure. And in looking at the cost of flights, the location of other chapters of ours, the cost of living index, frankly, Indianapolis came out on top of that list. And I love it, past ritualist. I love our history in Iowa City. I love that structure, just like a lot of our former staff and others that have visited since 1969, the headquarters on Church Street. But we'd reached the point where it was becoming more difficult to recruit staff, and the time had come for looking at making a change. And candidly, we were able to find a building that had been recently renovated, which was wonderful because it was pretty much turnkey, ready to go, and really below the budget we were looking at spending. I think you asked about sources of funds. Years ago, I give credit to former Executive Director Ray Galbraith. He set up a new headquarters reserve, so money from that went towards this. Money from the sale of Church Street, once that transition happens, will go towards it. And then lastly, there was some dollars taken from the housing loan fund that will be repaid over time. Just like we were setting aside dollars in the past for a new headquarters, we'll be setting aside dollars to refill that in the future. I think that covers a lot of that area. But you asked about Martland Incorporated. That's a great question. So in addition to being more than just a catchy name, one of the things that we've done recently is we've taken a look at the fact that our ability to buy general liability insurance for the fraternity has gotten more expensive and more difficult to acquire. So one of the things a number of other fraternity headquarters have done, and some have done many years ago, is that they followed exactly what Congress created in the tax code that the IRS allows, that you can create a holding company for assets, a 501c2, I believe. And right now the headquarters is at 501c7 for the county majors. I hope I got that right. But so essentially, the headquarters is an owned property. We did look at that as well. We looked at renting versus owning, and literally all the dollars that had been set aside since the time Ray started that fund would have been burnt within the first 7 years of a lease. And at the end of 7 years, we would have nothing towards a down payment, and we would continue at a high burn rate, with a much higher rate of cost than what we were previously setting aside for that rental amount, in terms of the new headquarters reserve. So that's what made ownership. Martlet is the owner. And just like we don't like chapters and don't encourage chapters to own chapter properties, we have housing corporations. Why? It creates a firewall, a separation of liability, and so that if someone sues Delta Chi Inc., we now have a much stronger position that the headquarters building, which is wholly owned now, not in debt of any sort, would be separated and have kind of that firewall trying to protect it off in that sense. So it's made up of 5 Delta Chi members on their board of directors, but they work very closely with the board of regents and the headquarters staff, and we think it's a responsible way to protect our assets and the fraternity's assets.
Excellent. Wow, that was a lot of information. Thank you so much for answering that question. Jared, we're going to move to you next. This is a question that 4 different people have kind of asked. Doug Galbraith, Iowa 04, Mike Moriarty, Oshkosh 71, Drew Revis, and Reed Davis, both from Appalachian State, 95 and 02 respectively. And they all want to know, taking into consideration the size of staff, the state of finances, and future growth, can you talk about what's being done to ensure a sustainable financial situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. Great question. So the staff today sits at 17, which is similar to some periods throughout our history. While we, for example, 2014 through 2018, while we may have had more chapters, say in 2005 with a couple of less staff members, we also had a lower average chapter member size of around 35, if memory serves, where in 2018-19, the average member size was around 45 to 50. And in 2001, for example, we had roughly 15 staff members, if I'm correct, and 118 chapters in colonies. Today we have 17 staff members and 113 chapters in colonies, with an average chapter size of 41. And we're expanding at 3 large institutions that they require more staff to recruit in today's culture on a campus for longer periods of time. There's no magic number. There's no magic number, and today the expectation is for faster communication, swifter responses, and more attention. And so we rise to meet that. And we do that through investing in our organization's future. From phone, texting, email, direct messaging on social media. These are all methods how we communicate with undergraduates and alumni. So there are more ways to communicate today than ever before, and we should rise to meet our members and not have them meet us because we're used to a certain level of communication. I'd also say, we've seen a higher demand by university and college officials to play a larger, more consistent chapter-specific role when a chapter finds themselves in the conduct process. And that's a level of commitment we're willing to make and have made, but it's a manpower commitment, it's a resources commitment, and it can often be the difference between retaining recognition or losing it. Now, I'll also just say briefly, speaking financially, yes, in 2019, chapters were closed for conduct or self-closed for size, and that means a reduction in membership, which means a reduction in revenue. Chapters who closed, a few chapters who closed in 2019 failed to pay the fraternity more than $60,000 in chapter receivables. And that's on top of engaging in dangerous behavior. And that's why those D resources are more important now than ever in working with our chapters. But in response, we reduced some areas of the budget by 50%. We've increased services. So we may reduce costs, but increase services by staff. We're on track for outdoing 5 expansions from the SI and having 6 new colonies in 2020. We're leveraging technology. We're listening to the undergraduates on how they prefer to meet with staff and how they prefer to learn. We're meeting them at their level. We've completely revamped the leadership consultant coaching program, saving the fraternity more than $80,000 in expenses. I could go on and on and on and on, but I won't because they're yelling at me. But I just encourage everyone to reach out to me. I would love to talk to you and have a conversation. My phone is always on.
Excellent. That was a very tough question. Thank you for trying to address that and doing so well. I've got one more question for Rod and a couple of shout outs, and then we'll have the closing question for the night. Rod, Mark Riley of the New Hampshire chapter wants to know a little bit more about what you talked about this morning, all of the alumni events, the engaging alumni around the country. We've had, I think you said this morning, 40 different alumni events around the country. Can you talk about delivering on, as he puts it, delivering on the promise of the Brotherhood of a Lifetime through the foundation and your view and vision on that?
Sure. Hi, Brother Mark. Thanks for that question. So we're simply doing what everyone would love for us to do for decades, but we have not had the staff to do it. So it's really getting out to the alumni, and we constantly remind ourselves that of our the usual suspects in our alumni circles. I won't say alumni base because I think that's what we're working on right now, but our alumni circles, all of the usual faces that we see constitutes probably about 2% of the people that have been initiated into this brotherhood. And it is hard for me to remember until I interact with some of my old chapter brothers myself that there are quite a few brothers that went to college, they joined our brotherhood, they had a good time, they graduated college, they closed the book, and they move on. And the same brothers then go off and join a golf club, they join the Rotary, they join the Masons, looking for the exact same thing that they had and could continue to have with Delta Chi. They just never had an avenue for it. Maybe they never went to a regional leadership conference. Certainly, most brothers never make it to one of our conventions. So this happened. I'll give a shout out to one of my brothers, Scott Miller. I don't think he's listening or watching tonight, but he made a comment at our last convention. It was the first time he had been, and he looked around and said, "My gosh, I didn't realize there were this many Delta Chi's. I've never seen this many Delta Chi's in a room or taking up an entire hotel." And it was an eye opener to him. So all of a sudden, he is now re-engaged as an alum. As a prospective donor of let me know what's going on with the fraternity and where I can help. And that's someone that was completely off the reservation, great guy, wonderful brother, always contributed very well in the chapter. A lot of them graduate and just don't know. So our alumni outreach, the point of that is to build that camaraderie, fly the fun flag, help them understand that there are, outreach opportunities for all the brothers that were in their chapter, or people that they knew in Delta Chi, and more importantly, through business connections, people who they did not know that they were Delta Chi's, and try to build some of those professional connections that will keep people engaged long term.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rod. We want to shout out a couple of guys. We had a great comment here from Timothy Helms just a few minutes ago, and he's just said, great way to do the call. This is a very impressive way to adapt with the times. So, Timothy, thanks for watching. We've had a lot of guys watching tonight and asking questions, and we've received a lot of questions in advance. Again, just to reiterate, all of the questions will receive a response, but we are coming to the end of our time tonight. So, in closing, here's our audible. We're calling it audible on the last question here. Tell us, and we'll give this to each one of you, tell us how alumni can get involved, which would make the organizations you lead more successful. And Aaron, we're going to give you the first opportunity here. And if you could kind of frame this in an international and regional service conversation.
Absolutely. That's a great question. On the international level and kind of on the region level, a couple things come to mind. We're always looking for people that are willing to not only give their treasure to the foundation, but also their time to the fraternity. And so I think about vice regents. I think about certainly local office positions, but I think about people willing to spend time on the board of regents. It takes a lot of time. I'm always impressed that people ask me, what's it like in Indianapolis? And I remind them that I, like all their advisors, are volunteers. And are not on the paid staff side. We have a few of those folks, but a lot of the majority of folks you see are not in that position. So certainly, we are always looking for the future farm team, people to be vice regents, people to serve international committees. We have a committee on service. We have a committee for the ritual, housing loan committee. There's tons of opportunities to get involved in different areas that meet over the phone. And that's a way for undergrads or alumni to get involved beyond their chapter. One of the other ways, so that's serving the position, is showing up. We now have over 35 alumni chapters throughout major metropolitan areas of the United States, and some of which are very active, some of which could be more active. All that's missing is you. And so the ability to show up to D.C., Kansas City, New York, L.A., and Fort Worth, DFW, they're all over the place. We talk about the brother of a lifetime, and that's what Rod mentioned earlier. What a great way to continue that involvement, the networking, the friends, just the social aspect of meeting people that have a shared common experience. And I'll end with one comment. One other way to be involved is to show up in St. Louis on July 29th through August 2nd. We were last in St. Louis when I graduated in 1998. And my personal goal is I want it to be the biggest convention ever, not because I live somewhat near it, it's a state away, but because the more people we get together that see the bigger picture Delta Chi, I think the better your experience will be. So we set a record in Denver of 624 people, and we only had 3 chapters in the whole time zone, based on where St. Louis is compared to where a lot of our chapters are. If chapters are sending 4 or 5 delegates, plus the alumni pool that seems to be gaining in size and strength, I think we'll easily blow away that record. But I look forward to seeing a whole bunch of you for either the first time to get your convention ladder and get your first rung, or adding to it, like Doc Underwood did with 26 as the convention honoree last time, and the most conventions Delta Chi history at 26. We look forward to seeing you in July in St. Louis.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for that plug to come out to St. Louis. Jared, we're going to flip it to you next. How can alumni get involved and we want you to kind of talk about the local level, because that's what you and your staff deal with so much on the local level. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the fraternity staff is here to talk to anyone, anytime. And so, I know we'll be reaching out to everyone who made a comment or had a question on Facebook so we can continue the conversation, engage each other. We may not always agree, but we have to have the conversation. certainly something I truly care about. So expect, somebody to reach out, and it might be me. But let me tell you, it starts with let's talk. Let's talk about what's best for you. Let's find the place that meets the demand in your life. And I think it's a tailored volunteerism, right? And depends on where you live, and it depends on how much time you can give. But there's always a place. And I think now more than ever, we're looking for mentors. We're looking for influencers. We're looking for people to have an impact. And what better person than someone who lives the bond, who has been an undergraduate, who has graduated, who has gone out, who has made something in their life, and who lives the values still today in personal life or in their professional life. All we're saying, from an hour a month to an hour a week, whether it be in person or remotely, through the mentorship network, where over 300 volunteer alumni have offered to be mentors already. Let's expand that. Let's expand on the opportunities. But again, like I said, it starts with us talking. Just reach out. I'll just tell you right now, 463-207-7200. 463-207-7200. You can email me directly. My email is on the website. We will find a place for every brother who wants to give back.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I really like that. It starts with let's talk. That's a great thing for all of us to embrace. Thank you for that, Jared. Rod, we're going to give you the last say here. And if you could, again, tell us, how can alumni get involved in the foundation, with foundation initiatives? And this is the closing thing here, if there's anything else you would add to that.
Well, dovetailing with what my esteemed brethren have offered in regards to viewpoints, it starts with something small. And on the donor side with the foundation, we have joked for years, quite a few people, the perspective of the donor, when we go to meetings of other foundations, NIC and other, people comment about this. A lot of times people think in regards to gifts, they especially when we graduate, we think, hey, I'm going to go out and make it in the world, and then I'm going to make what we deem a transformational gift. And giving just does not work that way. And I have a very short anecdotal story on this. I got a call from my alma mater a couple of years ago inviting me to our bowl game. And they had a suite, and they wanted to take us out to a steak dinner. And I said, hey, time out. You need to check your roles. I am not one of those types of donors. And they said, well, you're looking at it the wrong way. We're looking at our records, and you have given consistently for 20 years. So you are one of those donors. So it's not always about amount. It's about, where can I find a place now? What can I do now? And as we will, all attest to, you blink and 20 years go by, you blink and 30 years go by, and all of a sudden you realize how long it's been since you were an undergraduate walking your campus. The key is to find a place, and again, 1890 Society for our undergraduate brothers, fit into that army of donors. If you can, a moderate amount every year, but it gets you engaged in what's going on with our fraternity, and you can peek through the magazines. You'll take more of an interest in the websites. When you get the emails, you'll pay attention more, and there'll be more interest, and there'll be things that attract your attention to what your brethren are doing and where you can fit in. So dovetailing with the other two messages, it doesn't have to start big. You don't have to wait until some monumental moment. Just get re-involved. We welcome you back.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I want to thank each one of you this evening for giving your time late at night /give. And we encourage you to give to either the General Fund, the Raymond Galbraith Leadership Fund, or the Endowment Fund, based off of tonight's information. And in closing, we want to say thank you to all of you for advancing Delta Chi. This concludes the 2020 Delta Chi International Chapter Meeting. Thank you and good night.